You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome into another edition of your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. It's the Locked On Eagles podcast, as always, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Guys, today's show is sponsored by rockauto.com. Save time and money when using rockauto.com. Head over to the website and make sure you write down Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box? Gino, it's episode 2 this week of 5, downloaded into the listeners' phones whenever they subscribe to Locked On Eagles, wherever they get their podcasts, or on YouTube. And it's episode 2 of 5 during game week as the Eagles kick off the 2021 season this Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons. And today's a fun episode, Gino. We've done it together since 2018, and it's fun to always look back and be like, wow, we were really right about that, and we were really wrong about the other predictions. Today is our NFL total year-long 2021 predictions podcast. So we're going to go over the playoff seeds in the AFC and the NFC. We're going to predict the actual playoffs in August, I know, early or September. And then we'll get into some individual awards as well. MVP, Rookies of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year. Gino, it's a fun show we do every year. And again, like last year, I picked Cam Newton to win MVP. It's just kind of fun to go back and look, in a year, how things change in the NFL. Be like, wow, it really changed from that podcast.
Much like when we do any gambling on this show, Don't take our word for granted. Like, we just take it with a grain of salt. Like, this is totally a prediction. It's how we see these teams on paper, how we see these divisions on paper. I didn't do any win-loss. It was purely off of who I believe is the best team in that division, what are the 3 best wildcard teams in either conference. And this was the first year that we've done this, Lou, that I didn't have to think with or without my heart on this one and with or without my bias, because I don't have the Eagles in this bracket, so I don't believe so. Could Devontae Smith make a run at Offensive Player of the Year? It's potential that it could happen, but right now I'm looking at this Eagles team from an award standpoint, from a growth standpoint. Just get better this year, look better than you did last year, fall in line with the philosophy of this team, and then look at the rest of the NFL. A lot of these teams we're going to talk about, that's the formula you want to follow. You want to follow what Arizona is doing in the AFC West. You want to follow what a young Buffalo team is doing. Even a team that both you and I like, Denver, they're kind of on the way up a little bit, and I think a few people are sleeping on them. But when you look at these teams, they have good offensive lines, good defensive lines, and they have depth. And we have some question marks in terms of depth in Philadelphia, and a few question marks of will these young guys succeed this year. So it's tough to predict them to get to the playoffs, but I saw a couple podcasts today and articles saying that the Eagles might be a dark horse. Being around this team, I could see it with the talent, but right now there's just so much talent in the NFC, let alone in this division. For the Eagles to challenge for a playoff seed it's going to be difficult, I believe, in this conference.
I agree as well, and I think when you look at it, again, there's 7 seeds now, so it's easier to make a wild card spot for sure, as opposed to years past with a traditional 16 playoff. But at the same time, like you said, Gino, there's a lot of good teams in the NFC. I mean, in your own division, you got to deal with Dallas and Washington, and then the NFC West. I struggled to make these predictions because I'm like, man, in both conferences, I have to leave out some good teams for making the playoffs. And so with the Eagles, I also, spoiler alert, neither one of us had the Eagles in the playoffs, and we didn't have anybody winning any sort of awards, which is, disappointing compared to where we've been when it comes to expectations the last 4 years for sure. But at the same time, I think it's pretty realistic. I don't want to say the Eagles have no chance of making the playoffs. I have them around 7-8 wins this year. And if they were a little ahead of that with 10 wins and they made the playoffs, I wouldn't bat an eye. This team has 2 of the best lines in football. When you combine those with a running quarterback, that's a pretty good recipe for winning football games in the short term. But at the same time, neither one of us had the Eagles making the playoffs. And we'll dive into our playoff predictions and individual awards. Again, like Gino said, take it with a grain of salt, i.e. my Cam Newton prediction last year. At the same time, though, Gino, we've had some good ones. I picked Lamar Jackson to win MVP in 2018, and that was seen, or 2019, that was seen as a pretty big dark horse. So for every bad Paxton Lynch one, we have a good one as well. That was another one of my bad takes, so I'm just kind of burying myself here before we even get started.
Yeah, I've kind of been high on Green Bay the last couple of years, and I think I've only hit like one time in terms of how far that they've gone. So yeah,
this is me with the Panthers, right? I feel like every time we do the show, you're trying to like calm me down a bit about Carolina, and every year you were correct in doing so.
Another interesting division, and I think this season there's going to be a lot of turnover from teams that you saw in the playoffs last year. I mean, I think the top dogs kind of speak for themselves, but then once you get to the middle, I mean, there's a big middle in the NFL this year. I believe there are a lot of teams that are right on the cusp, right on the tip of finishing their rebuild that really could make some noise in this league.
Yeah, 100%. Gino, let's start in segment 1. Before we get into our actual playoff predictions in segment 2, individual awards in segment 3, let's just take a look at how we have these conferences seeded. And when you take a look at it's funny, like some of the things I thought, okay, were pretty bold for myself, you were kind of on the same wavelength. It's kind of funny. You can tell we're co-hosts together because we do think alike when it comes to football here in our predictions. And I don't know, I think the things that stand out the most, we'll start in the AFC, is that you mentioned the Denver Broncos earlier. We have 3 teams coming out of the AFC West each, and we both have all of the same teams, with the Chiefs being the 1 seed. But then we both really like the Los Angeles Chargers to make it with Justin Herbert in year 2, considering what he did at the end of last year. And then Denver, like you said, man, I kept Cleveland out, and that is very unpopular. But I'm like, Denver with the weapons of Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Noah Fant. I think Teddy Bridgewater can take that team to a certain floor. And with Von Miller coming back and Patrick Surtain, how good he looks at cornerback, that defense is going to get back into form. I don't know. I really like Denver to make the playoffs this year, and I see you do too.
Yeah, I put them as the 7 seed because I think it'll be like a last week 17. They're trying to get in, and they're fighting with the team. Like you have Indianapolis on there. I just look at that division much like I do the other West Coast division. At all these teams, yeah, they're going to beat the living hell out of each other, right? Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, they all have, I think, vast amount of talent. I mean, Denver, we don't talk about how good their defense is. And their secondary is just going to be tough to pass on that Denver secondary. And you talk about the weapons that they have and the stockpile of them. It's going to be hard to keep a team like that out when it comes down to a league where you have to score as many points as possible and hold a team to as few points as possible, which I think Denver can do. And I believe the Chargers can do that well. Yeah. People know that you and I are large fans of the secondary there in LA now with Derwin James and Nasir Adderley, Asante Samuel Jr. The list goes on and on. I believe that division is going to be fighting for the best record in football. I mean, even the Raiders, I believe, will have a decent team. They have some pieces on offense that can make noise. I don't believe they make the playoffs, but it's tough to look past the AFC West as not being the best division in football right now.
Yeah, I think the only difference we have here outside of seeding being a little bit different. So we both have Denver. We both have Los Angeles. You have Cleveland in, but I have Indianapolis. And I think that might have to do with maybe our expectations about Carson Wentz this year, right? I do think he's going to bounce back in a big way. A lot of people don't. That would be good for the Eagles, by the way, because that means he'll play over 75% of the snaps and they get a first-round pick. And it's not a knock on Cleveland for me. It's just, I don't know, Gino, again, every year, and I don't really have a great argument for why I have Cleveland outside of I just like these other teams more. And every year there are a few teams that disappoint, and not everybody can make the playoffs, right? So even in a 7-team format, there's going to be some good teams that are left out.
Yeah, see, the way you feel about Baltimore in that division, I really feel like that Cleveland is just
which is totally fair. Again, I'm not division. There's no crazy anti-Cleveland thing for me outside of Jadeveon Clowney. So it was tough to keep them out for sure.
Yeah, and we talk about like how you build a team. Their defensive front, Lou, is spooky to look at on paper.
Yeah, it is.
And then you look at the amount of receivers that they have, that duo in the backfield. They're getting better on the offensive line. I believe Pittsburgh is going to have a down year. Baltimore should still be right there. It just, can Greg Roman and that offense do enough to change the landscape of that division and of how Baltimore succeeds in this league? Because I think if they stick to the same formula, it might be a little tough. Like, teams have kind of figured that out towards the end of last year, but their defense is going to be great again. They still have weapons on offense. You still have a former MVP candidate. AFC's tough, man. It's going to be a lot of guys a lot of teams that have good young quarterbacks with a lot of weapons around them getting to the playoffs.
100%. The AFC is more fun when it comes to like potential long-term quarterback options you look at these playoffs, you got Mahomes, you've got Allen, you've got Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, potentially like even outside of them, Trevor Lawrence is in that conference now, and Zach Wilson and Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. Like, there's some good fourth place teams, the Raiders and the Bengals, they've got weapons, and Denver too, we have making the playoffs. There's a lot of fun teams in this conference. With Baltimore, I have them higher just because, like, again, you're right. With Greg Roman, they're always going to be held back a bit from taking that last step, right, and becoming what you need to be, I think, from where they're at now, getting to the second round each year to becoming a Super Bowl contender. They have to open things up more on this offense. But they are taking gradual steps each year, right? Last year, they got the playoff win. This year, they're building around Lamar better when it comes to on-the-field personnel. I love Rashad Bateman. So did you, coming out of Minnesota. They brought in Sammy Watkins as a third or fourth passing target when you have Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown already as well. Even with J.K. Dobbins out, Gus Edwards in the backfield and Lamar Jackson, I really like that Baltimore team still. I just think the ceiling is a little bit capped with Greg Roman, but I still think there's enough there to potentially go on a run. So, yeah, the AFC outside of, again, you have the Browns, I have the Colts, but there isn't too much difference there in opinion. When it comes to the NFC, I see you have two teams from the NFC East, with Washington winning the division as the 4 seed. Dallas gets in at the wild card spot at 7, and the difference is I have we both have San Francisco. Excuse me. I have Chicago making it over Dallas. And it's a lot for the same logic as San Francisco. I think Andy Dalton and Jimmy Garoppolo, they can get those teams to a certain floor throughout the first half of the season. And then, kind of like Colin Kaepernick did with San Fran in 2012, he'll take like a 5-3 type of team, and I think he'll take them to another level. And I expect that same type of thing to happen with Chicago and Justin Fields when he plays. They showed two of the last 3 years, they made it with Trubisky. So they can get there with a certain level of quarterback play.
Yeah, I believe that they'll be better than they were last year. I'm just I don't trust Nagy, in all honesty.
Which is fair.
He's one of those guys that kind of just pigeonholes himself in big games, and we'll see what happens with Justin Fields. I just look at San Fran, and much like I look at Cleveland, for example, they have unbelievable offensive minds calling the plays there in Stefanski and Shanahan. And I look at San Fran, and maybe Jimmy comes in and he goes 3-3, and then you bring in Trey Lance.
Right.
I really believe that they could blow up, man. They have a deep defense. Once again, they have a deep group of weapons on offense. You have one of the best minds in play calling. It's going to be tough, like the NFC West, the AFC West, the NFC West is going to be just as good. And I had to leave Seattle out of there. It was tough, but
I know, me too. It's like
these teams I think San Fran, the Rams, and Arizona all have better offensive lines than Seattle, and defensively as well. I believe that those teams will all be stronger. Quarterback wise, Russ is probably the best one there outside of Stafford for sure, but San Fran's going to score points. The Rams are going to score points. Arizona's going to score points. Between them, the receivers on those 3 teams, Lou, goodness gracious. That's how you build a receiving core.
Well, that's the point, is like Seattle, it's tough to keep a team out that has Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett. But at the same time, San Francisco has that with Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. LA has that with Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson,
Matt Stafford,
Deshaun Jackson.
Man, that's a dangerous
they upgraded a quarterback. And then Arizona, we're both really high on as the team winning the NFC West, that loaded conference with Kyler Murray, with DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, Christian Kirk. They drafted Rondale Moore in the second round. You add J.J. Watt to that defensive line with Chandler Jones coming back healthy. They've got a bunch of unicorns at linebacker with Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins. that's a loaded division, man. So again, it's tough to keep someone out, but I like Seattle's roster the least of those four, and I think Kyler Murray takes an MVP jump this year, and that's why I think Arizona wins the division.
Yeah, if you look at those divisions where I had multiple teams from, it comes down to how do I believe that they'll fare in division? And I can't see one, like a team like Arizona going 5-1 in that division. I think it'll be way tougher than people believe to win that division. It might be with a 3-3 record with a tiebreaker at the end of it. And same thing with the NFC East. Dallas could go 4-2 or 3-3, and so could Washington. That's why I looked at the AFC West in the same light. There's not a team like the Patriots did forever in the AFC East that would forbid a team from getting a wild card spot because they were so much better than everybody else. Mm-hmm. The level of competition and the margin between these teams, I think, is just so small. I talk about the middle. Yeah, Arizona is right at the upper echelon, but LA's got all the parts. San Fran's got the parts. Dallas is starting to come into their own. As long as Dak is healthy and their defense can hold a team under 30, they're going to score 40 a game.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and Washington too. Now you got Fitzpatrick. He's bound to put up points with those weapons that they have, and defensive fronts win you championships. Hard to look past them as a team that is going to lose many games because they get outscored.
Yeah, I think they were, when it comes to I threw Chicago in there as the 7. When it comes to the boundary teams, and I'm I was going between Chicago and a couple teams. It was Washington, it was Philadelphia. Gino, even you can make the case for Minnesota, New Orleans still with Jameis Winston. That roster outside of Winston is still loaded. Again, my Panthers love continues, and I can see them competing with how young and exciting that defense is and the weapon state they still have on offense with McCaffrey coming back. But again, there's got to be some bad teams. Everybody can't make the postseason. So I think what we have isn't crazy outlandish. I think the one thing people would think is nuts, at least on my side, is probably Cleveland not making it and Denver getting in. But outside of that, I think for the most part, we've got some pretty good predictions. And coming up next on this NFL preview edition of Locked On Eagles 2021 style, we'll now take these seeds and we'll do our playoff predictions. That's coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And guys, today's podcast is sponsored by BetOnline.ag. BetOnline is the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all your football action this season. Get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest and the world's largest $200,000 NFL Survivor contest. Open now at BetOnline. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today, and you're going to receive a 100% welcome bonus when you use our promo code. That's Locked On, LOCKEDON. And also, tomorrow, the NFL begins. Tampa Bay against Dallas. Be sure to take advantage of BetOnline's opening day super promo. Make a bet on the matchup between the Buccaneers and the Cowboys, and if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25 for new customers only when signing up and using the promo code NFL100. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Eagles fans, welcome back into this Tuesday edition of your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. It's Locked On Eagles. Louie DiBiase alongside Gino Camilleri. All right, Gino, let's get into it. Let's continue our predictions here, and we're going to get into our playoffs. We did the seeds, right? So now I want to get into more the actual playoff predictions that we did. And it's interesting. We both have, I think, would you call it a surprise Super Bowl pick? I would think so.
Yeah, I don't think many people are looking outside of the top two guys in Kansas City and Tampa right now. I picked Arizona for a lot of the reasons I said in the first segment. They have a young, very good core in terms of their offense and an innovative play caller in Cliff Kingsbury, and their defense just gets better and better and better. And you add J.J. Watt to the other side at Chandler Jones, who is one of the most underappreciated pass rushers maybe in the history of the league. And he just continues to dominate. And those young linebackers that they have, Lou, the young secondary with Budda Baker leading the charge, they can fly around on defense, absolutely fly around. And I look at the NFC, for example, I just think they're so much deeper than everybody else. I mean, Tampa has a very deep team. Green Bay has some holes in some different spots. So does Dallas, San Fran. There's some question marks as well. LA, I believe the same thing. And then Washington, quarterback play is going to come down to who wins it. I'm looking at Arizona saying, where's the hole, man? Like, where are they not deep at a position?
Maybe it's the
outside
coach.
of
the roster is ready to go. Outside of Kingsbury, maybe holding them back.
Yeah, I mean, they lose Patrick Peterson, but I believe that they'll be fine with their pass rush up front, able to hit home. And if defense wins championships, their offense is going to be able to just put up as many points as they want, while the defense holds teams to, 17, 20 points seems like an average game for the Cardinals defense for how good they are.
Yeah, I don't disagree with this at all. I think I was a year too early on Arizona. I had them as the number 2 seed last year, and I had Kyler Murray taking that MVP jump. And Murray, look, he certainly took a step up in year 2, but it wasn't to an MVP level. And I could totally see this happening, and that would be a hell of a Super Bowl to see Patrick Mahomes against Kyler Murray in that championship game with those weapons on both sides. That would be pretty awesome. And so I'm high in Arizona too. It's just, again, I had them winning the division, but once it comes to the playoffs, my mindset started to change a little bit here. And it might be really surprising that I have San Francisco going all the way. And again, that's a tough path. You got to go through Tom Brady. You got to go through Aaron Rodgers. You got to go through those other NFC West teams like Arizona, like the Rams, who they were in a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. You had Matt Stafford to that team. That roster, I think, is better than it was back then. I have the Rams making the conference championship, and I kind of wavered, Gino, back and forth between the Rams and Niners, but I'm kind of seeing like this recreation of the 2012 Niners, where Jimmy Garoppolo is going to start the year like Alex Smith. I think he's going to keep them afloat, and I think eventually, though, they're going to be like, okay, let's take the training wheels off. We're at a certain, we're knocking on the door. To bust that door down, we need Trey Lance. And I could just see Lance coming on the scene like Kaepernick and making this team get hot, making a good team great with his rushing ability, with that arm power. And like you said, their roster, again, they made the Super Bowl 2 years ago. And you've got Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. You have George Kittle. On defense, if Javon Kinlaw can take a step up in year 2 on that defensive line with Dee Ford and Arik Armstead and Nick Bosa, I just think the Niners with Trey Lance, again, that's the asterisk here, with Trey Lance, could get all the way. And I just think that Baltimore, it's their time. I think the weapons are improved on offense, and I'm just a huge believer in Lamar Jackson. And I think if someone's going to take that step outside of Kansas City this year over Buffalo, it's Baltimore.
Yeah, like I said, I look at Cleveland and Tennessee as two of the more potential teams that could do that. And Tennessee adding Julio Jones now, and they add Bud Dupree at the edge, and they finally have like a guy.
Caleb Farley stays healthy too at corner.
Yeah, they have a very good secondary too, Lou. Like they have consistent turnovers. They're outperforming teams on defense when it comes to the turnover ratio every single year, and they've only gotten faster on both sides of the ball, in my opinion. Caleb Farley, for all intents and purposes, could be a sleeper when it comes to Defensive Player of the Year in that defense, and they have our guy Simmons there in the middle of the defense, which is going to wreak havoc, and running the ball with Derrick Henry, and then having the ability with all those weapons on the outside, A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, good luck. It's going to be tough to defend a team like that. And I've been high on them the last couple years, and they beat the Chiefs a few years ago in the playoffs, so maybe they have their number this time around. But I look at Kansas City again, they improve their offensive line. They add more playmakers. They get faster on defense too. They're just building a football team the right way year after year, and hats off to Andy Reid and what he's doing, because they're going to be right there again, Lou. It's tough to look past a guy like Patty Mahomes and everything they have, that he's just not an automatic conference championship type of guy like we were looking at with Tom a decade ago. It's like every time you look up, they're there. Every time in the early 2000s, the Eagles were in the championship in the NFC, and then Buffalo did it not too long before that. And you go to the NBA, Detroit Pistons were in 6 straight Eastern Conference championships. That's a trivia question. I guarantee that you'll never remember. But you look at it, this is the time of Kansas City, and it's hard to look past them, man. And I think a young team that could duel with them, Arizona, very much could be San Francisco. Could be a Green Bay team with Aaron Rodgers last.
Isn't that the fun of this league? Like when you look at, the Chiefs.
There's so many storylines. I mean, it's the best reality television there is.
And Kansas City isn't a tier of their own, I still think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe Tampa Bay is there too, but I just when it comes to like offensive ability. But I'm looking at all the potential matchups, Gino, of a Super Bowl that could challenge Kansas City in the NFC, but also the AFC. Like when you look at Buffalo, when you look at the offense you talked about in Tennessee, when you look at Justin Herbert and that Chargers offense, and heck, even the weapons Denver has and the improvements Baltimore made. Baltimore is the most efficient offense, I should say, at least the last few years. I mean, most of it came on the ground, but still, nonetheless, a top scoring offense the last couple of years. And then in the NFC, like between Tampa Bay, Arizona, LA, Dallas, Green Bay, I love the way the NFL is being built right now. There is firepower everywhere. Like on which one of these teams is lacking in weapons outside of maybe Indianapolis might have the worst. Even I can look at Chicago. They've got Darnell Mooney, Allen Robinson, David Montgomery. I don't know, man. I love the way the rosters are being constructed now in the NFL. It's about offense. It's about passing the football. And to me, that's exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's why you and I both went about this the way we did. Teams that we have liked the way they've constructed their rosters. That's why I had a hard time keeping Washington out, and I really believe that they have a good chance to be the first repeat champions in a while in this division. And if Fitzpatrick can catch that Fitz magic once again, man, like he's done it. He's led teams like this to the playoffs. And
how long does the Fitz magic last, though? That was my only reservation, you know?
Oh, yeah. I said on which will come out tomorrow, we are capping it off, the NFC East on the Ultimate Preview show. I said that, they're going to get 2 free wins against Philly because Fitzpatrick just kills them every time.
They do.
Yeah,
he
just
really
destroys
does
them every time they play him. So there's
even
2
back
wins
to his Cincinnati days. He was tying Donovan McNabb, right, in 2008.
He beat him in Buffalo, man. He beat him in Buffalo. We were there at the game when Victor Abiamiri jumped off sides.
The Jaquay Parker.
Oh, Jaquay Parker. Excuse me.
Jaquay Parker. I'll never forget it. It was my first Eagles game ever.
Yep,
man.
That was Fitz.
Yeah, that was Fitzpatrick. And then 2018 week 2 with Tampa Bay, him and Deshaun Jackson kicked the Eagles in the back really hard. So yeah, I can totally see it. And again, that Washington roster is really good. I wonder, it's like when Fitzmagic isn't there, it's not just that he doesn't turn into a game man. He's not like a game manager that goes to this crazy Fitzmagic guy. It's Fitzmagic, or it's, well,
look at Chicago a couple of years ago, Lou, when Trubisky was just dreadful. And that defense literally brought them a double doink away from getting to the division championship. Yeah.
Same thing as last year with Chicago.
Yeah. And that's why this is fun, Lou, because you're like, okay, what team is 1 or 2 pieces away? And it's like, does that piece offset this piece? And that's what makes this fun. And we will always have something to talk about, even when it's not our team. We haven't brought up the Eagles one time since the beginning of the show, and we're still having fun talking about it.
Yeah, this is it's sad, man, though. This is the first time we've done this in 4 seasons together where the Eagles are just not at the focal point of predictions, but it is where they're at. But again, if you told me the Eagles were slotted in there where Dallas is, or Chicago, or Washington, or San Francisco, again, I wouldn't bat an eye. I think that with how good this conference is right now, they're going to compete. They're going to be in it. Like, they're not going to win 2 or 3 games like I think Detroit would, or Houston. But I don't know if they're going to be quite good enough to get ahead of these teams, because there are some good teams in the NFC in 2021. Coming up next, Gino and I are going to get into our individual awards. So we're going to get into MVP. We'll get into Offensive and Defensive Rookie of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, Offensive and Defensive Player of the Year. That's all coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
Before we do that, this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is now possible to go to your local chain front store and have everything that you're going to need for your car. Let's be honest. Why endure the pointless and seemingly intimidating questioning with the individual behind the counter who is only going to give you the brand that they happen to have in their warehouse? You have a computer, you have a tablet, you have a phone, some sort of mobile device, so go to rockauto.com. At home or in your pocket. Save time and money when you use Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30 to 50 to even 100% more for the same parts at a chain storefront? In this day and age, if you're still going into a chain storefront to buy anything, you're out of your minds. Go to Rock Auto. They have reliably low prices for every single customer, and they're family owned, and they've been doing it, helping do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. So now go to rockauto.com, and right in there, how did you hear about us box? Locked On. That we sent you, all our good friends here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank Rock Auto for serving us, and amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com has whatever you need.
Guys, does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live. You've got another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called Direct TV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before. So you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract, so get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible devices required. Content varies per package. All right, Eagles fans, welcome back into this Tuesday edition of your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. It's Locked On Eagles. Louie DiBiase alongside Gino Camilleri. We are doing our 2021 season-long NFL predictions. Gino has the Arizona Cardinals beating the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I have the San Francisco 49ers getting all the way there and coming up just short to Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. That'd be pretty fun. Lamar Jackson against Trey Lance, Kyler Murray, or Patrick Mahomes. There's a lot of fun combinations, and I think me and Gino would have some fun matchups for sure if it was up to us. So, Gino, we'll wrap up this edition of the show with individual awards and taking a look at our award winners. There are some interesting ones for sure. You have a back-to-back MVP in Aaron Rodgers, part of the Last Dance, right, in Green Bay with Davante Adams. I think there's some interesting ones. The only one we agree on is Trevor Lawrence to win Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I think they kind of have already given that kid Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Well, and the problem is I don't think Fields or Lance will play enough to win to have a chance.
It's a quarterback-centric league. You know he's going to perform there in Jacksonville. Even
got weapons, too.
Yeah, I have him as my top quarterback in fantasy right now. I drafted him number 1 overall in Dynasty for a reason. Like, he might not be the greatest quarterback in the world with this current team, but he's still going to put up numbers. He's still Trevor Lawrence. Like, there's a reason we talk about this kid in this way, and I think it's a surefire bet. And you look past that, like Jalen Waddle, I don't know. There's a lot of weapons there. Devontae Smith here in Philadelphia, question marks. I just can't see anybody else outside of Trevor taking it, in my honest opinion.
No, I agree. And again, if Lance or Fields was named the starter, like if Trey Lance was named the starter week 1, I'd probably pick Trey Lance. Again, you guys know how high I am on him. I had him going to the Super Bowl. But yeah, I think Lawrence plays, and I think Zach Wilson's going to be good. But with Lawrence and being the first overall pick, you know how these awards work. I think he'll get it. But outside of that, we vary. I mean, I think you can see my Kyler Murray logic though, right? Considering you have them going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Aaron Rodgers, I take the Last Dance into account. Like, I believe he's going to go out with a bang. And Kyler Murray, if he makes the Super Bowl on my roster or my bracket, like I predicted, there's a very good chance he could be that most valuable player on that team. And he's going to be a guy who can do it with his legs, his arm, got all the weapons. Yeah, that's the makings of the most valuable player in the NFL for sure.
I have our boy Brian Burns winning Defensive Player of the Year, Gino, and I think he's about to go off. Last year was a big step. You could see he's already one of the best speed rushers in the game, and I think this year he takes the jump, and especially with Hassan Riddick on the other side, Derek Brown getting better on the inside, Jeremy Chin on that team. It's the first round pick. I'm totally blanking on the corner out of South Carolina. Oh, J.C. Horn as CB1. I think there's a lot of pieces there, and I think Burns could go off and potentially lead the league in sacks. I think it's a good, when it comes to like bet online and you're making bets on Defensive Player of the Year, I think Chandler Jones is a really good pick, and he's just one of the most underrated pass rushers of the last decade. If you want, though, like a really big like buyout or like a big reward for a bold prediction, I like Brian Burns in Carolina.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think defensive end, is the way that it's going to go. I mean,
do corners ever win it?
Very rarely. I mean,
even Marshawn Lattimore had a great rookie year. I don't think he won it.
No, it's tough to look past the defensive end position, especially what Chandler Jones and Brian Burns do. I mean, great against the run, great against the pass. That's how you impact a game on defense.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when it comes to rookie of the year, it's kind of the same logic, but I like your Patrick Surtain pick because, Gino, he looked incredible in the preseason.
Man. Yeah, and they have a great secondary there, too. I mean, he's going to be the number one in a very deep veteran-based corner group. That's crazy that he's that polished. And he's going to get the chance to go up against some of the best names in football week after week. And if you want to solidify your ability to win the Defensive Player of the Year, or, the Defensive Rookie of the Year, it's by shutting down Tyreek Hill. It's by shutting down those weapons that they have in LA and Oakland. And yeah, I think Pat Surtain has a very good chance to be the Defensive Rookie of the Year, especially in that defense, which is run by one of the better defensive coordinators in the league in your head coach. So I think he has a very good chance to get that award.
Man, if I could tell 2019 Gino Camilleri that he has Dak Prescott winning an award over Carson Wentz, he would be tossing and turning right now.
Yeah, I put that aside, though. I put the bias aside.
No, I know. It's a great
Dak has everything, man. He really does.
There's no excuse.
How is he not going to throw for 4,500 yards?
I mean, he was last year before he got hurt.
Yeah.
He was throwing for 400 a game.
Yes, and our ultimate preview, that's what host of Locked On Cowboys, Landon McCool, said. He's like, yeah, you saw a preview of it in the first 4 games, and I mean, Zeke looks a little slimmer. Their offensive line is going to be healthier. I believe Tony Pollard could be the second best number 2 in the football right now. He's explosive. And then the 3-headed giant you have at wide receiver, you know how terrified I am that Eagles corners got to defend those guys. So they're going to put up yards, and it's going to be at the hand of Dak Prescott. So let's hope that everybody stays healthy, because the best way to win a division, the best way to win a championship is against the best competition. And I think Dak being healthy is the best competition we're going to face in Dallas.
Yeah, I think he should be the favorite for sure. I mean, again, he's set up so beautifully. There's not a lot of quarterbacks that have a better support system than Dak Prescott does with that offensive line and those weapons. With Carson Wentz, again, just my logic is, it depends on what you think the real Carson Wentz was. Was it the 2017 to 2019 run, or was it more 2020? And I don't know. I think there's a middle ground there to be had. And I think with Indianapolis, it's been a really rocky start. And if he stays healthy, that's a big if. I mean, he's got one of the best offensive lines in football. He doesn't have a great receiving core, but Michael Pittman and T.Y. Hilton is a lot better than what he's had in Philly for the last few years. And with Jonathan Taylor in the backfield, and obviously Frank Reich being the guy for him at head coach, and that's a great defense too. I just think he has a really good opportunity to bounce back this year and kind of prove the NFL that last year was a mirage and it was just, a product of a really bad situation. But we'll see. I mean, I think these two are certainly the top 2 favorites, and it's crazy because, Gino, we always had that debate about Wentz versus Dak Prescott, and now the situation's very different. It's like now between them, who wins comeback player of the year? It shows kind of a lot of the hardships they've had to go through.
Yeah, it's the adversity of the NFL, man.
Yeah.
And you want to see all these players come back healthy, and even in college football, just seeing the injuries that occurred this week, it definitely sucks. It's the worst part of the game. And I said it, that the best competition is playing the best roster, especially in your division, especially to win a Super Bowl. We talked about when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, would it have been as nice to beat Jacksonville as it was over beating the Patriots? Absolutely not. Beating one of the best teams, one of the biggest dynasties in the history of the league, much more satisfying. So when the league is good and you're beating great opponents, that's what makes the sport amazing, man. I love talking about good football teams, even though we didn't touch much on the Eagles today. We talked about the product that we followed this league for, these superstars. That's who we're going to win the awards at the end of the year.
Yeah, and trust me, our listeners love football as much as we do. I mean, they love the NFL. I see them on Twitter all the time talking about so many other different things, and that's why we have the best listeners in the world. And guys, we will get back to some Philadelphia Eagles talk tomorrow. We've got matchups to watch against the Atlanta Falcons. We finally get to start talking about a game. Thursday, we have our crossover with Locked On Falcons. We got another show as well for you Friday. So again, be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your shows for 5 episodes a week. And we're also on YouTube and I'm writing stuff for Fox 43 as well. Gino and I will be making appearances for them on TV, on their YouTube page. We're on Twitter at LockedOnBirds, at GC24_football, at DiBiase LOE. You can find our content everywhere, all day, every day, right here on your only daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, Locked On Eagles. For my co-host, Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.